Thank you, Padraig, for that very comprehensive report and every success in the work of the centres into the future. The top table is going to vacate the top table and sit in the front row here for the moment. We're going to move into the Connolly piece now. But just before we do, can delegates please be aware that a Global Solidarity Fringe meeting will take place at lunchtime in room T1 on the ground floor. That's Global Solidarity Fringe event, T1 on the ground floor. And delegates also be aware that at the end of the Connolly piece, that conference will adjourn until 2:30. Okay? Thank you.
In windy Edinburgh town, so history does relate, a lad was born on June the 5th of 1868. 'Gainst poverty and hardship too, his parents did engage, until James Connolly at 10 was earning his first wage.
My father was born in Edinburgh in the year 1868. His father, John Connolly, had evidently emigrated from the neighbourhood of Ballybay, Scottstown, County Monaghan. His mother's name was Mary McGinn, I think of the same district. I've gotten these particulars from Desmond Greaves of London, who's examined the register at the Church of St. John the Baptist. I'm giving the Bureau a copy of these records. I was the fourth child. Mona, Nora, and Aideen were older. I was the firstborn in Ireland in November 1896. My father used to call me his Irish Molly, and I used to be called Molly in my youth.
I had always been associated with my father, James Connolly, from the time I was 6 or 7 years of age. He had taken me on lecture tours with him when I was a small child. He was always giving me books to read. And he wasn't content with merely giving them to me, but he would ask me about the books that I read. He was very particular. I suppose he was helping me in my education. And whenever there was a word that I didn't understand, he wouldn't tell me, but would get the dictionary out and tell me to look it up myself. I don't know why he picked me. There was an elder sister who died, and there were many younger ones as well. Well, I like to think I was his favourite. You know? I'd say it was between me and the younger sister, Fiona. He was very fond of her too. Well, whenever I was what I call riding the high horse, as he thought, he used to say, "Gwendolen Violet. Now, Gwendolen Violet." That brought me back to reality. Put my feet back on the ground.
1 a.m., Dublin Castle summoned.
It jumped into my mind, even though I wouldn't let the words form.
He was going to be executed. They got ready.
We got ready. Silent.
Closing the door.
Army lorry through the street. The most eerie trip. O'Connell Street still smelt of burning. Memories of Mona. Dim and deserted.
A photographer took out their picture on the way in. Called, caught, frozen in the moment. in half light, without permission, unkempt, angry.
There was a double staircase at the main entrance hall, long landing between the two. A soldier sat on every step, armed with a rifle and bayonet, staring. Appear as if you are expected. That's what he always said. My hands dug deep into my pockets. 1 a.m., appearing as if I was expected. Heart beating, thumping, holding it together. My mother and I were taken to the top officer. Bayonets were aimed at us at all time, in case we stole him from them. Apart from Sergeant Tobin and Father Aloysius, we were the only ones allowed to see him.
They told him not to give my father any news. But the surgeon, he took a fond liking to him. They would discuss poetry and writers, and one would say a poem and the other would quote a poem in opposition to it. And one would make a joke and they'd laugh. And all this time, my father was dying every minute. Dying every minute.
Searched for knives or drugs, anything for him to commit suicide. My mother spoke then, as the nurse's hand was on her spine, and in her good voice, "If you think that, you don't know him then."
Into the room, dying every minute. Gangrene had set in. He couldn't sit up, unable to lift his head. He was dying every minute, and the gangrene was poisoning his whole body.
His shattered ankles were protected with a cage. We sat either side. Too much breath in my body, not enough in his.
I suppose you know what this means.
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 She broke first, gulping. From somewhere deep inside or far away, I couldn't tell.
He begged her to stop, not to unman him.
Hot spit heaving in my throat. My nails dug into deep ridges in my hands. My jaw clenched tight, stinging, threatening to betray me too.
She sobbed, unmanning him.
It undid me. Dropping into my lap, he begged me to stop.
My mother could hardly talk. But your beautiful life, James, your beautiful life. But hasn't it been a full life? And isn't this a good end?
He said he was very proud of me.
He told her he was proud of her.
And asked me for news from the north. I had to tell him that the men had stopped fighting.
He was very proud of her.
He said he was very proud of me. I said, but I've done nothing. Nothing. I've carried messages. Heavy. Dropping into my lap.
I stood at the window, pulled up the blind and waited for the dawn. And when I knew he was gone, all the family came in and I took out his final statement and I read it.
Afterwards, we went back to the castle and demanded his body. And they refused it, as they did his watch and his wallet and his clothes.
We knew
We
they
knew they
would
would
refuse
refuse
it. And as we stood there indignant, a nurse came along and gave my mother a lock of his hair.
I have that still.
Although he died on that May morn, never say he died in vain. For since that time, the boss's rule was ne'er secure again. As long as there is one alive who'll stand for liberty, they won't have killed the spirit of our own James Connolly.
Thank you, delegates. I'd just like to thank the actors from Manu and Fergus Whelan for singing a fantastic presentation. The conference now stands adjourned till 2:30. Thank you.